Here's the question your risk committee should be asking every single quarter, not how many AI use cases did we ship. The question is this: is this thing compounding, or is it just accumulating? This is the finale. Today we make that question measurable, and then we close the loop. Across this series, we made one argument. The model is not your constraint. Everyone can buy the same frontier model. Your advantage is whether your institutional knowledge compounds under governance. A documentation dump accumulates, it gets bigger, it does not get smarter. The cost of the next use case is the same as the last one. A context graph, built well, compounds. The 10th use case inherits the validated definitions, the certified procedures, and the approved controls of the first 9. The curve bends. So the job of this episode is to make that bend observable. 6 metrics. Each one is a piece of evidence you can put in front of the board. Metric 1, reuse rate. Of everything a new AI use case needs, the definitions, the procedures, the controls, what share already exists as a governed, attested asset versus being built from scratch. Take committed exposure, the metric we've followed since episode 2. The first use case that needed it had to define it, find its golden source, and get an owner to attest. The next use case that touches committed exposure should not redo any of that. It should inherit it. If it does, the green segment grows. A rising reuse rate is the cleanest signal you have that the graph is compounding. A flat reuse rate means every team is still starting from 0. That's accumulation wearing a costume. Metric 2, time to production. How long does it take to get each new AI use case live in a domain? This is reuse rate's payoff in days. The first use case in the regulatory reporting domain is slow. You're building the substrate while you build the use case. The second is faster. The third faster still. If your time to production is not falling within a domain, the inheritance isn't happening. And notice the discipline here. We measure this within a domain. Cross-domain comparisons are noise. The signal is the slope of the staircase inside one bounded area. Metric 3, definitional consistency. In the domains you've covered, how many critical data elements still have contested or duplicated definitions? Remember episode 6, Treasury and Finance reporting committed exposure to the board, and the numbers didn't reconcile. That was a context failure, not a model failure. The cure is one canonical definition with an owner who attests to it. So the metric is brutally simple. In a covered domain, contested definitions should trend to 0. Not fewer. 0. In a governed domain, a CDE that still means 2 things is an open finding. Metric 4, promotion velocity. In episode 10, we built the learning loop, the path that turns a one-off exception into a tested institutional knowledge, the same way issue management closes an item with a control enhancement. Promotion velocity is the cycle time across that path. How long from an AML alert disposition exception was identified to, that's now a certified policy provision every future use case inherits? Crucially, fast does not mean unguarded. Promotion still runs through evaluation, human review, and certification, AI drafts and tests, humans approve. We're measuring how quickly governed knowledge forms, not how quickly the gate is skipped. A loop that promotes nothing isn't safe. It's stalled. Velocity tells you the institution is actually getting smarter. Metric 5, coverage and freshness. 2 readings on 1 gauge. Coverage, what percentage of your critical procedures are actually encoded as owned, versioned assets, not as a stale document, not in one long-tenured employee's head. Freshness, when was each one last recertified? Because, and this is straight from episode 12, context drifts, regulation moves, policy moves, the business moves underneath it. High coverage with stale freshness is a trap. It looks like progress and quietly becomes a liability, an asset everyone trusts that no one has checked. Both readings have to be healthy. Metric 6, trust incidents. When an AI system gets something wrong, you trace the error to its cause, and you count the ones rooted in missing, stale, or conflicting context. This is the discipline from episode 6, operationalized. A context failure is not an IT bug and not a model defect. It's an operational event, so you root because it like any operational event. And every one of these should be answerable by the card we've carried since episode 6, what the examiner asks. Who approved this definition? What's its lineage? What depends on it? When was it last reviewed? If you can answer those 4 questions for every incident, you don't have a supervisory problem. You have a control environment. Step back and look at the 6 together. Reuse rate, time to production, definitional consistency, promotion velocity, coverage and freshness, trust incidents. None of these is a vanity number. Not one of them is use cases shipped. Each is a different instrument reading the same thing, whether the bend is real. This is the misconception we have to kill out loud. Success is not the number of AI use cases you've shipped. A pile of shipped use cases that each rebuilt understanding from scratch is accumulation, more surface area, more risk, no compounding. Success is evidence of compounding. These 6 metrics are the thesis from episode 1, finally made observable. So here's the closing argument. The context graph is not a feature you ship. It is the foundation your whole AI program stands on, and the control environment that makes that program examinable. It converts your most defensible asset, your validated understanding of how the institution actually works, into infrastructure that makes every AI investment safer and smarter than the last. And let's be honest about the work. The hard part was never the definition. The hard part is the build. Connecting fragmented systems. Encoding tribal knowledge before it walks out the door, designing the accountability loops across 3 lines of defense, and committing to context as a first-class, governed asset, not a side project. Which brings us to the mandate. Start now. Not all at once, not for everyone, not with a platform purchase. We busted that in episode 13. Start deliberately, domain by domain. Pick a bounded, high-value domain. Resolve its loudest definitional conflicts. Encode its procedures. Operate the loops. Then let the next domain inherit what the first one built. Because the institutions that start now compound advantage, while their peers rebuild understanding from zero every single time. Use case after use case, exam cycle after exam cycle. The gap between those 2 pictures only widens. Let's light the whole staircase one last time. The reframe. The constraint isn't the model, it's 3 kinds of context. Knowledge, expertise, norms, and the value lives in the relationships, which is why it's a graph. The anatomy. Substrate plus operating capabilities, and a sharp line around what it is not. Not a catalog, not a semantic layer, not agent memory, not a document repository. The stakes. Context failures are safety and soundness failures, and without one governed graph, investment fragments into islands instead of compounding. The build. 5 capabilities, 1 control loop, discovery, the development lifecycle, learning loops, activation, and governance. AI drafts and tests, humans approve. The play. Adopt it domain by domain, avoid the 4 anti-patterns, and measure whether it compounds. We opened the whole series with 2 banks who bought the identical model on the same day, and a year later one was pulling ahead on every use case. You know the answer now. The second bank's model was never better. Its context was governed, shared, and compounding. So your move is small and specific. Pick 1 domain, name its owners, resolve its loudest definitional conflict, start the loop, and make sure you can answer the examiner's 4 questions for everything in it. The model was never the constraint. Compounding, governed knowledge is. Go build it.